sudden move over the weekend imposed large exports duties across the ferrous value chain in the likes of iron ore, steel. But whether this is a case of government singling out inflation fight as for a particular industry as compared to the rest, let's broadly understand and have a conversation around it with the Nomura Vice President Priyankar Biswas. Hello and welcome to BQ Prime. I'm going to start off by asking you about this two contradictory things which have been happening. On one hand, you've seen that there is an import duty on input which is cut, while the exports duties have been raised. What is the net impact of the overall development on the spreads that you think, and what is the government essentially trying to do with this move?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki, for having me here. So first of all, for the cut in the import duties on, let's say, coking coal and the other types of coal, so that's around 2.5%. So we had published on that impact. So broadly, I would say that leads to a positive effect of around 800 to 900 rupees per ton on steel pricing. But on the other hand, with the 15% export duty that has been put in place, so you can have potentially steel prices correcting as much as 10,000 rupees. That is in the worst case. As regards to profitability, probably at the worst case, you can have something like 9,000 rupees per ton shaved off from the EBITDA in the worst case. So that may be something like 40 to 45% of the EBITDA that, let's say, we have for a JSW Steel. As far as your question on what probably can be the government's motive for doing this. So since we also cover construction and infrastructure, what we have seen over there is that a lot of cost inflation had come in, and that had kind of impacted the EBITDA margin for players like L&T, which we saw in the fourth quarter, or for that matter, a KEC and even industrial names. So if this large type of steel price correction does happen, then we can probably see EBITDA margins improving something to the tune of 40-50 bips for L&T, maybe larger, 100 bips plus for KEC. So that is what we see the impact as.
And this kind of margin, positive margin impact, you expect to come in within a quarter, or you think that's going to be a long drawn over the year kind of estimate that you're talking?
So I think the fall in prices, since the duty is effective almost immediately, that is 22nd May.
Yes.
So maybe in a quarter or two, we should see the impact of these prices flowing through.
Okay, sure. I was just going to come on to the next question, which is like, what do you think would be the ultimate industry which will benefit from this? And you've perhaps just put out your neck and said it's going to be, capital goods and infra largely at play. I'm assuming also a bit of auto component for that matter would be added, or the industry would be added.
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, our analyst Kapil has actually done a separate work on autos. So maybe you can refer that separately.
Okay. Priyankar, I was just wondering, how is the demand situation stacking up right now in India and exports? I mean, how will these measures impact the overall exports that we've been witnessing?
So export demand has been kind of tapering. So there was a sharp spike in export demand just after the Russia-Ukraine war, especially from the European Union due to the disruptions. And we had seen export realizations rise up materially then. However, we have seen a sort of weakening in the export demand of late. So like the JPC released figure for April 22, for instance, the export numbers are down by 20% plus. So that is what we see. And the domestic steel consumption demand is frankly not picking up. So it's 1% up year on year in the Indian domestic steel consumption. Anyway, 1% up number is a weak number. And that too, we have to consider that April 21 had some sort of the second Delta wave impact as well. So I would say that the domestic demand is yet to recover at all.
Sure, and just the flat roll products, both HRC and CRC in itself contribute to what percent of your overall exports? Any idea on that, Priyanka?
So See, the if we consider the categories on which, let's say, the export duties have been put in, like, let's say, if that was the question, if I understand,
Sure.
then we see that it broadly covers more than 97% of the current exports. So in fact, in our report today, we had explicitly given out, like, each category wise, what is the export, for instance, and it's only like 3-4 odd percent that is not covered by this export duty category, so hardly anything.
Just for the benefit of viewers, Priyanka, who've been watching the show, would you please highlight the categories that have maximum amount of which have been contributing maximum percent to the overall exports? Which those two categories would be?
Yeah, so the maximum would be your, what we say as this, under the header code 7208, which is the HRC of 600 plus. Then the second largest category would be HR plates, so hot rolled plates, again 600 plus, and that followed by the cold rolled coils. So that accounts for bulk of the Indian exports. Now all three of them are under this export duty imposition structure.
Fair enough. Priyanka, you've already spoken about how margins will be impacted, but just at the cost of repeating myself, with the domestic demand already being muted, and now export realization further coming down, given that this is going to be rendered a little competitive, or rather not so competitive in the global markets with the the export duty which is coming. What is the margin hit do you see for all the three leading companies, when I say Tata Steel, JSW Steel, and JSPL for that?
So we can't really comment on the entire steel coverage space, because we do cover JSW Steel only. But what I can say that we like in our published estimate, so we had something like a EBITDA per ton of something like a 19,700 rupees for FY23. So if we take broadly a 9,000 or 8,000 rupees hit, so broadly your EBITDA is shrinking to the extent of 40% roughly. So that is the extent of hit you can imagine
For the entire
in the
financial
worst case.
year, a 40% correction in the EBITDA, overall absolute EBITDA, is what we could work with, right?
Probably in a worst case, yes. So of course there can be a possibility that coking coal prices do come down. They are like elevated at $500. So if those comes down and some sort of relief do happen, then that's a different story. But as things stands today, this is a situation that can pan out.
That's a big hit that we're talking about, perhaps. Amidst all of this, where do you think the huge drawn capital expenditure programs will now stand at? Because we've seen Tata Steel coming out and talking about the 1 lakh crore capex that they intended to spend. It's been about JSW Steel Dolvi expansion plan. Do you think now these companies would want to go back to the drawing boards and kind of recalibrate their capital expenditure?
See, uh, that may very well be a possibility, and I think the companies are best placed to comment on that. But what I can say is like that, if your EBITDA per ton, which is the metric that we look at typically, that were at supernormal levels, and we are now getting back to, let's say, a pre-COVID level types profitability, then there could be a recalibration of capex.
So, Priyanka, with a 40% cut that is expected in a worst case scenario on the margins, if we are just supposed to put a number to the capital expenditure, you will also you see that shrinking by what percent, if at all, you think the dynamics is supposed to be worked out?
So we have not really worked it out as of yet. But again, what I understand is there is a significant potential that it may be cut down materially. So a lot of these projects announcements and that what we saw, there may be second thoughts about those.
Is the number looking as steep as a 40-50% to the capital expenditure program, or you think that's going to be a little less than what
So I think it would be premature to comment at this stage. So let us see how things evolve.
Priyanka, I was just speaking to JSPL's MD yesterday,
Mhm.
and in a very broad comment to BQ Prime, he said that this is not something that I mean the government needs to rethink and revisit the kind of decision that they've taken, because it seems like they've singled out one single industry for the inflation fight, leaving all the others untouched. So it seems a little unfair for the steel industry, and he's given suggestions like the government should either withdraw or, for that matter, taper it down and bring the whole duty impact in the next 3 months, or probably relook at the coal production numbers where the coal has also been a factor which has been adding to the cost inflationary pressures. So, what's your view on that, and how do you view the suggestions,
So I think what he said actually makes sense. Honestly, like the duties are applicable right from 22nd of May. So typically steel companies, when they book their export orders, so these are typically 1 month forward or something like that. So the orders for, let's say, the month of June in all probability would already have been booked. So in which case it becomes very uncertain that what happens to the realization on those orders. So if they are not able to, let's say, renegotiate a price or something like that, then there is a straight cut hit, probably something like $100 per ton that probably comes in. That's what we had calculated, broadly $110. So that can of course happen. So yes, the industry should have been given some time to, let's say, at least get over the contracts that they already have in place. Otherwise they're getting a hit on that. So that's clearly there. In terms of coal, you see the major input, and that's what I'm speaking from a BOF perspective. That is the basic oxygen furnace perspective. Is typically this imported coals, that is PCI and coking coal. Unfortunately, the prices are very high at this moment. So that is impacting spreads. So the government has given an import duty waiver. I don't think that the government can do much from here. I mean, they have reduced the import duties. Maybe in case of the secondary steel industries, which let's say use thermal coal for their induction for their operations, for them maybe a relook at the domestic coal supply is maybe warranted, but for the steel majors, the coking coal is a far bigger driver.
right? The last question that I have for you is, what do you think about the impact that this would have even on iron ore industries with the export duty coming in? With the incremental produce that's been coming from Odisha right now, you think that will also weigh on the pricing power of iron ore as well?
See, we have done this analysis in our report as well. So right now, India was exporting only the lower grade iron ores, so which we call as the below 57%. And currently, the price of that stands at something like 46, $47. So even if the incremental 20% duty, so this already had a like a duty in place. So even if we consider the duty that is implemented of around 50%, so if we consider that, then the price that it comes to is very close to what the domestic price of iron ore already is at. So probably we do not see a big material change in the iron ore prices because of the decisions.
All right, Priyanka, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking to these new friends.
Thank you so much, Nikhil.